Hi,
Okay.
everybody. I want to introduce you to Reverend Dawn Britt, who has been in our Safely Embodied Learning community. And it's an amazing story of how she's worked with herself. First of all, let me tell you that Reverend Dawn Britt has a doctorate with a focus on the spiritual aspects and the healing of children who've been exposed to childhood trauma. So it's right up our alley. And then, Dawn, tell me about what happened, how it happened, and what you've seen happen as you've changed.
Well, I think growing up with childhood trauma in a family where there's a lot of abuse and neglect truly is a complex situation that is probably compounded due to the fact that it's consistent and it's something that it just keeps going. It never stops. And as a child, I think it's very difficult to understand, like, what did I do, what's causing people to treat me this way. And so of course, obviously, the reflection is back on myself. So I mean, I remember being little and hating myself, even hitting myself with a hairbrush and just saying, I hate you, I hate you. And I think part of that is because I just didn't understand. Because when you're
What child does?
they don't and they don't have the wherewithal or the capacity to understand or make sense of what's going on in their life and what's happening to them. And so as a result, you find ways of coping as you get through all of that. And then, of course, you become an adult, and the adult has its own ways of coping. For me, it was more a workaholic, being, striving to do more and more and more and achieve. And of course, that has a double-edged sword. It's good that you do achieve, but it also forced me to not really understand the whys of what I was doing. And so I got my calling in really when I was in my 50s, probably like middle to late 50s. And that calling, I knew that it was from God. And so my calling took me on a new direction, a direction of being and not doing, which took me forever to really kind of understand all of that. I think subsequently to all of that, I think it was caring for my mother, who was kind of the abuser in her final days of life, and finding out my brother that I had not known for 33 years, that he was dying, and his eventual death and her eventual death and the death of a really close friend of mine sent me into this trauma world. So everything collapsed. And that's really when I sought out becoming safely embodied, because I didn't understand anything that it said. I couldn't relate to any of it. I couldn't relate to the feelings. I couldn't relate to sensations. I didn't know what those were. I really didn't know anything because I had been so shut off from my body and so shut off from, I think, the world at large. And I was living in a kind of like in a false world, really. And so when I found that book and I found Deidre's work, it just related. It was like something was calling me that you need to spend time with this. And so, I just delved into it. I, jumped in with both feet. I attended the meetings that we had monthly or twice monthly. And I just, listened to other people, and there was community. I found community there. I found people that had the same similar like experiences of trauma. And then I just kind of utilized the book. I didn't understand what becoming safely embodied really was. I had no idea. And now I understand that it's this process of really truly integrating, my mind and my body and my spirit, which is interesting because my dissertation was all on this, but I think I knew it intellectually, but I didn't know it in my soul and in my heart. And so what has happened is I've learned to pay attention to my body sensations and my thoughts and my emotions, and really to accept them without any kind of judgment. And I've really, learned as Deidre has put in her book about these time capsules that, when you're triggered, you just literally, well, trauma's with you your entire life. That's all I can do is minimize my reaction to it and keep it so that it's lower to the point where there is no impact when something happens. That's my goal. But I do realize that the trauma is in the here and now. Even though these time capsules come up from the past, the trauma itself is with me. And so I understand now the process of what is going on. And so through Deidre's book, I think I've understood about how trauma can kind of block that process of becoming safely embodied. And so I had a real issue with how do you become safely embodied when you can't get out of the trauma world, when it's daily and constant. And now I realize that you have to experience the trauma, and you have to have learned that it's something that has happened to you. It doesn't define who you are. That every day you have a choice. You have a choice of how you react to it. You have a choice of what you say to yourself. You have a choice of how you live in the world. And so even though I probably learned at an early age to dissociate from my body, or to become numb to my emotions, I now do my very best to accept these emotions. That's part of living. And using Deidre's coping mechanisms have become very helpful for me, like metta, saying things I say to myself, and being able to be mindfully aware of the present moment without any focus on judging it or evaluating it. Just it is what it is. And also there were just so many tools that I found in her book and in the writings that just really helped me. It was like, doing mindfulness, doing yoga, staying present in your body, being able to relate to what you're feeling and what you're thinking and your sensations, and being able to just be okay with that, and just paying attention all the time to what's going on. And so I think now I've kind of gone into the acceptance. A lot of times I don't like what I'm thinking, or I don't like the sensation. I don't like the emotion, but I just sit with it because I understand it's from Deidre that it's going to rise, crest, and fall. And it does. It's scary. And at first I didn't believe it was going to rise, crest, and fall. But if you stay with it, it really does, which is, really important, I think.
Right.
So I think that's that's been my journey. I do think that, becoming safely embodied is really, it's kind of like when I went into the ministry, they kept saying, well, this is a journey. This is a journey, or, you're walking spiritually. And it took me a long time to realize that, but now I realize that in what the healing process is. The healing process itself it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's just, and every day the journey's going to be around one corner that's going to be good and another corner that's going to be not so good. But that's just life. And it takes time, it takes effort. But it's worthwhile. I remember like maybe 2 years ago, somebody said to me, oh, it's worthwhile that you're doing this inner work and that you're trying to, and I remember looking at them and thinking, well, yeah, right. That's easy for you to say. But in reality, I think it is, because you can never be as joyful as you can be as sad. There's a dichotomy, I think, in life that is really, very true. And so to really experience the fullness of life, I think you have to be able to also experience the grief and the pain. And, being a minister, I went through a lot of grief and pain, having to attend funerals and having to do them, and having congregations and people that you're responsible for. But I still think I was so cut off from my emotions. And so,
You know what was amazing, Dawn, speaking of that, because when I first met you, you cried all the time.
right, I did.
We talked about, you just said about the rise, crest, and fall. All that emotion came up, and you were so doubtful that it would ever settle. And, a couple months ago when we were talking on a group call, I said, oh my God, Dawn, you're so different, right? And you knew it. You knew it. It was like amazing.
It was. And I told you, I said, it's like all of a sudden your book, it's dawning, no pun intended, it's dawning on me that, that everything you write, well, first of all, I know you have gone through this journey. That's one thing, which is so important to understand and have someone who's traveled the same journey, which I think is the importance of the self meetings that you have twice a month, because I think that's so critical. Community healing and community healing in connection with others is just vital. And so, but you have to be with people who are like-minded with respect to what you have gone through, not to sit there and labor in it or to, spend your time just saying all the bad things that happen. So you kind of stick in the mud, but that you're lifted out and you can see other people who have been lifted out. And that's so refreshing. And it brings you such a sense of hope and clarity and vision that there can be a different way. And that's, I think.
Dawn, what do you think helped you shift the overwhelming feeling to being able to process? Like, it's such a radical difference.
I think part of it was really realizing what you were saying about these time capsules and really understanding that when I get triggered automatically, and it can be triggered by just a sense of smell. It could be, I could be out and someone says something to me. It could be anything. And it could be, who knows, hundreds of times a day, I don't know. But when I get triggered, that I automatically, without me even saying anything, my body has already gone into that trauma mode. And so from that moment on, I'm not living as me. I'm living as me at whatever age that was. So I think that was one thing, was that realization and really understanding what is going on. And then the other was stepping back from that so that it's not just me, but it's I see in me. So then I'm the wiser. I'm the one. So I'm the spirit of wisdom. And I can say, I see in me that I'm scared, and so I can then comfort, and then I can then, address whatever it is I'm seeing in me, which means I'm detaching from myself as a greater source of wisdom. Mm-hmm. I think that helped a lot. And then also just being able to not be afraid of
the feelings that were coming up.
Yes. Because
go ahead, Dawn.
Well, when you grow up and you have feelings or you're really scared, but there's no one to attune to you, no one to comfort you, no one to say it's going to be okay, then all you do is internalize. You just sit there and you worry and worry and worry and think, and you don't know what's going on. And so when you do that for however many years, it's embedded in your psyche, and it becomes a rut in your brain. And I think you even addressed that, where you have to change that, and you have to change those patterns. And so I think that is something that's people really have to really understand, that it's not them, it's something in them from the past that is surfacing.
I think that's so powerful that you are speaking it, and it probably is one of those things that we need to hear over and over again, especially in the beginning of the healing, is because it is happening in our body, but psychologically, it's the review, it's the overwhelming, it's the hijacked emotion arising. But like,
Right.
go ahead, tell me that. I'm feeling it's in here, it's happening right now.
Right. And it's hard and very difficult for people to accept that and understand that at a gut level. You might even understand it intellectually, but if you have not taken it in and internalized it and allowed it to become a working model for you, then it's just always going to be there, and you're going to have the same disruption to your life and the same patterns, and it's just going to go on and on. But if you stop and pause and just, allow it to happen and realize, okay, this is not me. This is something that's happening in me from the past. And you see that clearly, then you can learn from it. And once you learn from it, then it gets lower and lower and lower. It's kind of like my son used to play those video games, and they would have these things, and you just kept hammering them until their health life got less and less and less, and then they would just go away. Well, it's kind of like that to me. You just have to keep, and you can't. You can't. You have to have a lot of self-compassion and just be okay with yourself. That this is going to take some time. It's okay. And you're always addressing yourself as, I know this has been painful. I understand you had to go through this, but it's okay now. And I'm here to protect you. I am here. And so you don't need to, and after a while, I think that inner self starts to believe. See, at first, I don't think my inner self trusted or believed in my greater wisdom. I was like,
well, that's what happens when we're disconnected, right? If we're over here, we have to, this inner part of us, these child parts, need to know that I'm actually going to be there, and that part isn't alone. It's a, really a beautiful reconnection that happens.
Well, and I think part of, a lot of your work too, I think has been really important with respect to attachment. Because I think that primary attachment is so crucial. And you've talked about Bowlby and Mary Ames and all. Those are ones I had to study also with my work. And Bowlby's work, I mean, it's so important how those attachments are formed. And so you can't go back and redo what you didn't have, but you can become your own attachment figure. So that you don't have to, and I say don't have to rely, but I don't mean that in a way of being independent. I just mean you can do that yourself. You can become your own attachment figure, and you have to do that. Otherwise, I think the healing process is very difficult because those primary attachment figures, if you had none, or they were neglectful, or they, and sometimes it's just part of life. Someone's working, they just can't meet the needs. But I think that attachment work that you have referenced and that you've been involved with, I think is really very, very important in the healing process too. I really do.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's true. That it certainly was one of the key things that helped me is that when in knowing that it's not just happening out of the blue, that there's a reason why this happened, but that doesn't mean that we're stuck there. We can earn our way back into that, and it's absolutely worth the journey. And that's what is so powerful about your experience and what you're speaking, and like the gift that you're giving to people, Dawn, by saying it's possible. You can change. You don't have to be stuck. You don't have to be trapped in it. You don't have to shut it down.
No, you do not. And I think also how you talk about that sense of belonging, that sense of, safety, and then being safe, because you have to cultivate safety. And for me, it was kind of interesting because I thought, I don't feel safe really anywhere. I had to figure out, where do I feel safe? And sometimes I had to find that in other people, or I had to find that in nature, but I had to figure that out. And, when you talk about one thing is being safe and the other is safety. And I think that's also very, very important. And part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I mean, that's way up there. You can't reach full potential or empowerment or anything that's, more cerebral than if you don't have those basic needs met. And so safety is like really up there. Safety, trust are like imperatives, I think.
And I think you're pointing to something that we all feel like, I'm not safe. I haven't been safe, but our heart, our soul, our spirit, whatever language we use around it, knows something and knows that place of safety. And that's worth everything, not to diminish that or disallow that in any way. It's like somewhere in you, deep inside, something.
And I think that's a really good point, because you have to continuously check in with yourself and say, do I feel safe here? Or sometimes I'll notice when I'm with friends, I think, gosh, I don't really feel safe with this person for whatever reason. Or it may be like when I'm walking at the river, I'm thinking, I really feel safe here. My husband says, you're not safe there, but I do feel safe there, because it's hard to explain, but there's just an innate sense of safety. And I think that's what you're speaking about.
And learning that innate sense, if we don't slow down and attune to those inner signals, they don't make sense. But once we start doing that, being like, oh, those are the signals that mean safety to me, or belongingness or relief even, then we can begin to see it more often.
Absolutely. So I think that is really, really very important. And I think where I am now is, carving out that, as you say, that new path, trying to figure out or choosing what is that new path, and, being able to continue to get, I think the way you put it is guidance from the wiser self that is inside, and listening and to what my intuition says, because really your intuition is a strong component of who you are, and it's something that really we should all spend more time really listening to it. But when you're working and you're busy, or you're just going through life, it's very difficult. You just shut that whole thing out. You shut it out. But if we can slow down and spend time, I think, listening more to our inner self, I think that wisdom is there, and it's really rock solid. And you have to just train yourself. You have to train yourself to be different. I think that's what I'm doing. I'm training myself to be a different person, training myself to react to situations differently, training myself to have a new narrative that is a narrative that has options in it that are options for success and for things that I really think are important in life, versus just kind of following whatever mindless path I think I followed, when I was younger. I think that's really also very important.
Dawn, that's such a good point about how we have to train ourselves. And there's a way, I think I have parts of me that could think, I'm training myself out of being me, but that's not what it is at all. It's really about training myself to see and know the best part of myself. Would you say that?
Absolutely. I think that is exactly it. Training yourself to trust the real you, because, and I say the real you, the you that was pre-tarnished, pre-rust, pre-everything, that has the innate wisdom and the ability to look at life with full of possibilities and full of hope, instead of looking at life and thinking, as with a victim mentality. That's not me. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person. So I want to, I want to be able to look at life and say, what are the possibilities? What are the opportunities? Where can I find the hope? Which is really, why I do what I do. That's
Right.
You got to bring hope, to everybody.
This is so great. This is so great because we could be in any particular moment, we could be any version of ourselves, but we can choose to be the best possible version. And that's what you're saying is we're training ourselves to be the best possible version of ourselves that we want. Well, so great.
Yeah, it's your best self. It's I think there have been books written on things like be your best self, but it really, and I don't know, I haven't read any of them, but I think the point is that you are becoming your best self, and what you're doing in your book and in your groups is you are helping people to retrain and to change their life patterns to something new that will allow them to flourish and allow them to be able to be empowered to make the best choices versus just sitting back and letting things wash all over us. That's the way it used to be. It's just, okay, someone's going to wash something all over me, and that's not life. Right? I don't think that's even spiritually. I don't think that makes any sense, because spiritually, you're guided by an inner wisdom, inner spirituality, whatever your religion may be or whatever. It's still something within you deep inside that has been put there so that you can continue to grow and develop. And in my religion, we call it being able to grow in your faith, but regardless of what it is, it's still, you are developing to become your best self, or who you are supposed to have been, had you not been tarnished and rusted and by what's happened to you in the past and by your life. Because you don't choose it. You don't choose who your parents are. You don't choose your situation. You don't choose any of that, but you can choose how you react to that.
Dawn, that's like wisdom in a nutshell.
But it's true. It's true.
Right.
It's very true.
You are absolutely amazing. You are so inspiring. I'm so glad you're doing the work that you are, because look at how you get to help people, and look at who you are is incredible.
Well, I thank you and your group and your book, and I really do mean that, and it's been a journey, but I felt there's that connection that I have felt through the group and through your work, where I wasn't really like out there alone in the journey. And that's very important, because that being alone, that is the worst. Isolation is the worst. And you just tend to isolate when you're caught in that cycle, that vicious cycle of fear, anxiety, panic, depression, whatever. And it just cuts you off from the world, cuts you off from things that are fruitful and things that lift you up and give you your spirit back.
Dawn, thank you for being who you are, for doing this work with yourself, for being willing to speak about it and not be shy about it, and let us all go through a healing process because of you. What a gift, not to just say, well, I can't tell anyone what this is.
Well, thank you. I thank you so much for your consistency and the sense of being there, and also bringing some wisdom in times where I was thinking, I don't know. I don't really know if that's, but it's true. I really do. I really do appreciate all that you've done, and as I said, and just knowing that you have been through the same. But that's so empowering.
That was one of the hard things of when I was healing back in the 90s or 80s or whatever it was, is that professionals were supposed to admit that they had something wrong with them. I was
Right.
like, oh my God, that made me feel so ashamed and so alone. And to be honest, Dawn, the reason why I do what I do is because of people like you. Like, because I get to see the gift that you become and who you are, and that's worth everything to me.
And I think I see that genuineness in you, which is part of helping in the healing process too. I really truly believe that that's who you are. That you really do mean that. That's very encouraging to know that someone really does care. Because sometimes you're out there on that island, you really don't think anybody cares, even though when there's a lot of people who do, you just don't feel it.
Like I said, this is why I do what I do. And thank you for seeing that and getting that and walking together with us all on the path.
Well, thank you.